Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the 2027-28 annual rule cycle proposal webinar. I equally would like to inform everyone that this meeting is being streamed live and recorded as a public record. A recording of this meeting will be available at www.new.ncwildlife.gov. Commissioners are reminded to say their names before speaking or making motions. Please keep microphones muted unless you have a question or comment. Presenters will have their cameras on, but we request that board members keep their cameras off during this meeting. Are there any procedural questions at this point? If not, I'd like to call on Margot Minkler to call the roll, please.
Good morning. Going to do a roll call of our Rules Committee members. Committee Chair Wes Seegers.
Here.
Committee Vice Chair David Hoyle. Committee members Tommy Fomble.
Here.
Steve Wyndham. John Stone. J.C. Cole. I just want to make for the record that I do see Commissioner Cole on the webinar, but he may be having audio issues. So I will mark him present. Okay, I hear you. Thank you. And ex officio members, Mark Craig.
Here.
And Landon Zimmer.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, currently you don't have a quorum, but I will monitor the attendees and mark them present if I see them join.
All right, thank you. We will proceed though. In that we won't be taking any formal votes, I don't think, here later. So that unfortunately we don't have a quorum, but that does not prevent us from moving forward with the information to be presented. So at this time, I'd like to call on Carrie Ruhlman, the Commission's Rules Coordinator, to give us an overview on how we will proceed.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Commissioners. What we have for you today is the presentation of the 2027-2028 annual cycle rule proposals. And there's a lot to go through today, so we'll go ahead and jump right in. It's been about a year since the Rules Committee last met, so we're going to start things out with a brief overview of the annual cycle schedule and the criteria for rule development. After that, we'll get into division presentations of the proposals by the division chiefs. So now, since this meeting is virtual, chiefs are going to present their rules and then pause after each proposal to see if there are any questions on those proposals. So commissioners, feel free to jump in if you have any questions about the proposal at that time. Otherwise, after each batch of division proposals, either Will Casola or I will chime in to go over specific public engagement plans for the proposals, and we'll have time for questions and to go over any concerns related to the criteria for rule development. So once all divisions have presented their proposals, we'll wrap it up and go on with the next steps and any general concerns or questions about the annual cycle rules. So where we are currently in the 27-28 annual cycle is on step 2. The subject matter committees heard these proposals at their February meeting, and this is the step where the Rules Committee reviews more specific details about those proposals. This year, we have 28 proposals, and we'll go through all of those today. If you need more detail about what's being proposed, you can find that along with draft rule text in the packet of information that was sent and distributed to you before this meeting. So as we go through the proposals today, what staff are looking for input on is whether or not these rules that are being proposed meet the criteria for rulemaking. And specifically, that is, they have to be clear and unambiguous and reasonably necessary. So clarity is the first kind of criteria for rules. Basically, the public has to be able to understand very easily what it is that we mean by our rule. So, for example, is it clear that this is an elk or does it look like a deer? So things like that we'll be asking about just to make sure that everybody's kind of on the same page with what's being proposed. Next is impact. We have to assess for impact. So we need to make sure that the rules or the rule changes won't have a huge impact on the people that have to comply. We need to consider the cumulative effect of the rules, so we'll be asking about that also. Next, the rules need to achieve the objectives in a cost-effective and timely manner, and they need to be easily implemented. And then finally is engagement. And as we go through, you'll see that we've considered some of the interested stakeholders, as many as staff can think of at the moment, to be made aware of the proposed changes that may impact them. But we do need input on if you can think of any additional stakeholders that need to be notified on the front end so that we can ensure that they have a chance to comment on the proposed changes. So we'll hit on all these things as we go through the division proposals to make sure we're putting the best package forward this year. And that takes us to the Inland Fisheries Division proposals. So at this point, I'll hand it over to Division Chief Corey Oakley for that presentation.
Good morning, Commissioners. We will go through our inland fisheries proposals for this upcoming cycle. So the first is striped bass and their hybrids on the Tar, Pamlico, and Neuse rivers. If you recall, we have a temporary rule that the Commission passed not too long ago. That is the exact rule that you see here. This would put it into permanent rulemaking. Is to establish a season in the Tar, Pamlico, and Neuse rivers and their tributaries from April 1st through April 30th. The daily creel is 1 fish, and there are no fish less than 18 inches or between 22 and 27 inches. The reason for this rule is we basically know at this point through all the genetics work that we have done along these rivers that this is primarily a stocked fishery at this point in time. It is being maintained through the stockings of the Wildlife Commission and the Division of Marine Fisheries. And wild reproduction is basically not occurring in these two river systems. It might be occurring, but it's very limited. And so we would like to allow harvest of those animals in the Neuse and Tar River so that our anglers can have that opportunity to harvest those fish. Obviously, coastal striped bass fishing is very popular and it really is kind of a heritage fishery. I grew up doing it. And so this would allow that opportunity to return because that has not been the case in the Neuse and Tar Rivers since 2019. The reason the rule is structured the way it is we had to match the joint rules that were on the books. There was a joint rule that was on the books between us and the Division of Marine Fisheries, and those joint rules weren't open at the time. And so this matches basically an older rule. If you can remember back, for those that have been on the commission, this rule was in place prior to the moratorium on harvest. So we're going back to that rule. As we get into joint rules, eventually we would like to change this rule again to make it a little less cumbersome than what it currently is, but we had to match that joint rule. Does anybody have any questions on this rule? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to the next one. The next one is another striped bass and hybrid rule. This is for Lake Townsend, which is in Greensboro, or just north of Greensboro. This would put the rule at 20 inches from the current minimum size limit of 16 inches. The 20-inch rule is kind of our standard minimum size limit for striped bass and their hybrids across the state. And the reason we're doing this on Lake Townsend is that we are no longer stocking Lake Townsend with striped bass. And so management has been discontinued on the lake. This change will make it consistent with the statewide size and creel limits, as I mentioned before, though you're likely not to run into a lot of striped bass from here on out in Lake Townsend because we have stopped stocking that fishery because it just didn't work in that system. Any questions on that one? All right, the next one is, the next couple will be on largemouth bass. The first is Lake Holt, which is a lake just outside of Butner. This will remove the daily krill limit for fish less than or equal to 14 inches and create a daily krill limit of 5 fish per day for fish greater than 14 inches. So basically what we're trying to do is encourage harvest of smaller fish, smaller largemouth bass within the system. The population has been stunted for a long period of time. It was stunted when I worked in District 5. So we're trying to allow harvesting of smaller fish. This will allow those remaining fish to grow larger, and we will be protecting those fish with that 5 fish per day for fish greater than 14 inches. So we're just trying to alleviate that overpopulation and stunning problem in the system. Any questions? All right. The next one is Cane Creek down in Union County. This is Cane Creek Reservoir. We're removing the 16-inch minimum size limit at Cane Creek. At one time, the anglers in and around Cane Creek requested this minimum size limit, but basically what it has done is led to smaller largemouth bass and decreased catch rates of legal size fish. So we're trying not to remove the smaller fish. We're trying to remove the smaller fish while allowing the remaining fish to grow bigger. Any questions? All right. And then the next two will be on fish that we co-manage with the Division of Marine Fisheries as well. This is bluefish. This will increase the daily krill limit from 3 to 5 fish. This matches the recommendations of the Mid-Atlantic Fisheries Management Council for recreational harvest of bluefish. We already have a temporary rule that is allowing this to occur. So this would just put this in permanent rule. All right. We'll move on finally to Sheep's Head. We just talked about this in our previous meeting. We have a temp rule that is out right now to be looked at, but this also would put this temp rule into a permanent rule. We would reduce the daily krill limit from 10 to 5 fish and increase the minimum size limit from 10 to 14 inches. Basically, this matches what Marine Fisheries Management says they need to do for the fishery. Looking at the ages have been truncated. They're basically losing older, longer. It's an older, longer lived species anyway, and they're losing some of those older fish, and so they're trying to protect. They're also losing young fish too, so they're trying to protect both of them. And this is kind of just a decrease in that harvest. Any questions? All right, I think I'm turning it over either to Will or Carrie.
Thank you, Corey. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to now briefly discuss the public engagement strategy for these 6 fish proposals. For these proposals, staff have identified our target stakeholders as coastal anglers and anglers in Districts 5 and 6, District 5 for Lake Townsend and District 6 for Cane Creek in Union County. In addition to our standard outreach for all annual cycle rules, which includes public hearings, postings on the Commission's social media platforms, email notice to interested persons, as well as a press release, we plan on specifically targeting these stakeholders through the Fishing e-newsletter and a brief spotlight on the Two Bald Biologists podcast. Are there any questions on this engagement strategy? Okay. We're now going to review the 6 fish proposals that Corey just presented for clarity, impact, implementation, and engagement. And so as Carrie mentioned earlier, we want to make sure that these rules are clear and understandable for the public, that they're not unduly burdensome, that they achieve their purpose, and that they are noticed to the correct stakeholders. I'm going to pose a number of different questions to the committee. Please feel free to jump in if they spark any questions or concerns for any of the proposals we just went over. Do you think that the rules will do what we need them to do? And are there any concerns about the clarity of these rules? Are any of the proposals potentially unnecessary or overly burdensome on the regulated public? Are there any thoughts on ways we could achieve what needs to be done in a more cost-effective or timely manner? And lastly, is there anyone we're missing in terms of interested or affected stakeholders? And so thinking about these 6 fish proposals, are there any questions or concerns on the proposals themselves or in regards to those questions that I just posed to the committee?
Let me just make one quick comment. You know, this, and this is really to the commissioners, and Carrie and I talked about this previously. This review that Will has given us right now, we've really never had this type of format before. A lot of it's been assumed, but I do like the fact that as commissioners, we have an opportunity to look at both clarity, impact, implementation, and engagement. So if you've got some thoughts, this is really the time to sing out. And however, most of these, and there again, this goes back to Corey's explanation and the explanation that the public will see as well. I mean, a lot of this is really fairly simple. I mean, you know, and the explanation of why, but you know, there's always some question that somebody may have or some ambiguity that somebody sees that the rest of us don't. So if you have an opportunity or something that you want to see, now is the time to bring it to our attention. So just a comment, but Will, back to you.
Thank you. If there's no comments on these fish proposals, I'm going to hand it over to Darren Barnes to present the land and water access proposals next.
Thank you, Will. So today I'm going to present the 11 land and water access rule proposals. And because we have so many, we're going to go through the first 6, then we'll pause to discuss an engagement plan and the criteria for those, and then we'll pick up the other 5 just to kind of make it a little more manageable. We won't have to go through all 11 at one time. So our first proposal is on Johns River Game Land, and this proposal will restrict non-hunting recreational use of the game land during the hunting season. So Johns River Game Land is a permit-only game land, and if you look in your packet or see on the map here on the screen, you can see it has a lot of disabled hunts, a lot of disabled hunt blinds that are along the trails, along the road network, and we have challenges with non-hunting recreational users coming in there and biking, hiking, doing a lot of different activities down those trails or roads, and it interrupts and disturbs those permit hunt opportunities. So the idea with this proposal is that we're going to restrict those other activities during those hunting seasons, during those permit hunts. Outside of those permit hunts, they will be able to access the game land, and outside of the seasons, they'll be able to access the game lands for those other activities. But during these permit hunts, we want to restrict those other activities. Any questions about the Johns River Game Land rule? Okay, we'll move on to the Big Swamp game land, and Big Swamp is a new game land. It's a brand new tract that we're turning into a new game land. This game land is about a 2,519 acre game land, and we are trying to establish it as essentially a new 3-day-a-week game land with no deer or bear hunting with dogs. And part of that is because if you looked at the map as well, there's really one access point that is on this game land. It's down along Highway 211 at the sort of the bottom of the property on that main road that we're going to put a parking lot and an access point into. And the trails is a very wet area, wet game land. The road network in there is would not hold up to a lot of traffic. And really there's no surrounding roads to the game land. So we didn't feel it would be appropriate to allow dog hunting on this property. So we're not gonna start it out with deer or bear hunting with dogs. Any questions about this, the Big Swamp game land? Okay. Our next rule is on the White Oak River game land. And this addresses the waterfowl impoundment that is on the White Oak game land, river game land. It's on here. It was circled on the map that you got in your packet. And there's a lot of confusion about this impoundment, especially when you're talking about the early teal season, about who can be in there and on what days that they can be on there. The current rule, if you look at it, talks about what days are available to hunt. And so staff would like to clean up this rule, remove a lot of that confusion, and just make this particular impoundment to be hunted, waterfowl hunting by permit only, so that we can issue permits for the teal season, we can issue permits for the regular waterfowl season, and cover those days that, those holidays as well, to be able to allow waterfowl hunting, but by permit only. It should solve a lot of confusion that this impoundment has caused the public. Any questions about the White Oak River game land proposal? Not, we'll move on to Nantahala game land. And so this is an interesting proposal. This is kind of a situation that's caused us challenges over the years. Essentially, and I talked about it a little bit in the lab, but essentially there is a little portion of this technically Nantahala National Forest or the Nantahala game land that resides in Transylvania County. However, the Forest Service themselves look at that little piece of property as is not part of Nantahala, but as part of the Pisgah. So the rule when they changed the deer hunting rules in the mountains, this little piece of property kind of popped up as an anomaly. And so we're proposing this rule to remove this piece of property from the Nantahala game land. So the deer proposals that were proposed, I think it's 2 years ago, would have given them a 1-day doe season on that little tract. So we're taking that 1 day away. We're also sort of striking that tract and adding that tract to just Pisgah. So it won't be considered a Nantahala tract. It'll just be part of Pisgah, and we'll follow the rules that the Pisgah game lands follow. So it's kind of a complicated explanation of why we're doing this, but it will clean up a lot of confusion on that little tract that resides in Transylvania County. Any questions about this rule proposal? Okay, moving forward, we'll talk about the Tillery game land. This proposal would require a point of sale permit for quail and woodcock hunting on the Tillery game land. And this proposal is one based on staff have seen an increase in interest in quail and woodcock hunting on Tillery game land. Tillery game land management has produced a lot more acres of very high quality habitat that we're seeing quail start to show up on these game lands. And there's concern of potential over harvesting of these quail resources on this game land. And so one of the thoughts would be what this proposal would do would require a point of sale permit for you to quail or woodcock hunt. One, to get an idea of the number of hunters that are going out there hunting for these quail and woodcock, and also would allow us to survey these hunters and understand, how often they're hunting these game lands and sort of what their effort is. We're also doing this in combination. We have a number of other game lands that require permits for small game like quail and woodcock, and so we'll combine surveys with those other game lands to kind of get a better idea of of our quail and woodcock hunters on our game lands and the impacts that they're having on those quail woodcock resources on those lands. So with that said, is there any questions about the utility game land proposal? Okay, if not, we'll move on to Pisgah. So our Pisgah proposal will, if you remember, like last proposal, rule proposal cycle, we proposed to restrict the Lutz tract to hunting and fishing, trapping only. Well, this proposal goes and cleans up the rules related on all those Pisgah game land tracts and tries to consolidate them to the same rule language, which would be prohibiting horseback riding and target shooting across on the Roaring Creek and Lutz tract, because it's already restricted on the other tracts of Pisgah, Little Table Rock, and yeah, the Little Table Rock tract and the Linville River. So we're in the Black Bear tract. So those are the three other tracts that are part of Pisgah. So this will make it consistent across all the Pisgah tracts as far as horseback riding and target shooting. Any questions about this proposal? Not, I'll turn it over to Will.
Okay, so for these first 6 proposals for the Land and Water Access Division, staff have identified target stakeholders as hunters, game land users, the U.S. Forest Service for Pisgah and Nantahala rules, and local governments, specifically for Johns River and Big Swamp. So in addition to our standard outreach for all annual cycle rules, specific notice will go to these entities by means of the hunting e-newsletter and emails to local governments, the Association of County Commissioners, and to the League of Municipalities. So are there any other stakeholders that anyone thinks might be interested in these first rules? All right. So thinking about these first 6 proposals that Darren presented, do we think that the rules will do what we need them to do? And are there any concerns with clarity in the explanations or any of the rule text?
I have a question.
Sure.
The Pisgah game land, how's the horseback riding causing environmental impact?
So horseback riding in general can cause environmental impacts, especially if they're using the same trails. That constant use of trails can degrade that habitat or the trail and those habitat types. It's not necessarily, I don't know that there is necessarily a known horseback riding problem on the Pisgah tracts, but since we have already restricted on the other Pisgah tracts, we wanted to have more clear rules. We're trying to clean up our rules as well, as far as making it very clear to the public, simplifying those rules so they understand how they're regulated. And so the thought was that they wanted to match all the Pisgah tracts and make them the same across all the Pisgah tracts. So where we had restricted horseback riding on some of those tracts, we wanted to include the remaining tracts. The Lutz tract doesn't have horseback riding. It has trails, but they're hiking only trail. And there's no trails on the other tract as well up there that we're adding to that. The Roaring Creek tract. So we don't have any active horse trails on any of those, or designated horse trails on any of those tracks. So they will be riding off track if they were right.
Are there any other questions or concerns about clarity or necessity or impact? Any thoughts on anyone we're missing in terms of interested stakeholders? Okay, if not, I'll turn it back over to Darren to go through the rest of the proposals.
Thank you, Carrie. We'll continue with the Northwest River Marsh Game Land down there on the coast. This is a coastal game land in Currituck County, 2,800 acres, all very flat land. And this proposal is to prohibit target shooting on this game land. And there's a number of reasons for that. Target shooting in general causes litter and trash, and it is a big safety issue down on this game land because it is very flat. So bullets can travel long distances in this area. And this proposal was actually brought up by a member of the public that went onto this game land, and there was a lot of target shooting going on, and they feared for their safety coming into the game land. Enforcement has agreed that the target shooting is not appropriate on this particular game land. So this proposal will prohibit that. Any questions about that? This proposal? If not, we'll move on to Butler Falls, the Noose game land, to what is termed the New Light Beach area. And you can see on your map, there's sort of two tracks there. The main problem track is the peninsula that's east of the road. This historically has been a sort of party location for many, many years. Have bonfires and parties and a lot of drinking and other things. Definitely not hunting, fishing, or trapping activities. And it's getting pretty bad. And so enforcement goes out there a lot. We've made a lot of efforts to block off this track, to put up fencing and sort of barricade this track so they couldn't drive out on it. But they still use this track pretty heavily for other recreational activities. A lot of different kinds of recreational activities, which is negatively impacting the visitors of this area. So this is a request from enforcement to restrict the use of these two particular tracks. They included the track on the west side of the road of New Light Church Road, because as soon as we restrict them on that peninsula, they were afraid that they would move into the west side of the New Light Church Road. So we've included both tracks in the rule, and it will restrict activity on these tracks to hunting, fishing, and trapping. Any questions about this proposal? Okay. With no questions, we'll move on to the bear hunting on game lands. So this is more of a enforcement technical correction. Currently, the rule reads, bear shall not be harvested on Sunday. And so this change will switch using the word harvested to the word taken, which allows enforcement to better manage that take of bears, because take is a more inclusive definition than harvest. You harvest, you actually have to harvest the bear. Take includes all the activities up to taking that bear. So preparatory, to kill, capture, pursue, hunt, or otherwise harm wildlife resources. So it gives them a wider range of enforcement capability for harvesting bears or taking bears on these game lands. And so this proposal actually covers a number of rules. I believe it's in 14 different rules in 10D where we used harvested, and they want to convert that to taken. So it'll unpack 14 rules, but that's the only change, is changing the word harvested to taken. Any questions about this rule? Okay. And our next rule is related to prohibiting fixing nails, screws, bolts, or applying paint and vegetation on game land. And this is one that has come up because from an enforcement standpoint, we are seeing a lot more. We already have a rule that talks about permanently affixing stands to trees using using nails and bolts and things like that. But this rule also adds to that rule applying these other markings. So we have instances where people are applying paint to trees, to leaves, to different vegetation. We even had a situation where an individual had put up plastic signs or I guess markers, if you will, with like stand numbers on it, and was then trying to sell hunts on those at those stand locations. And so this rule would address all of those kind of affixing signs or markings on those trees and on that vegetation, in addition to any kind of use of those nails, permanent mounting of deer stand, which was already in the rule, but it will be added to this rule. Also includes mounting cameras or hardware for cameras, like permanent mounting of cameras. It would address that and make that illegal to do. It still would allow the temporary mounting of cameras and stands, but not the permanent. Any questions about this rule proposal? All right. So our last proposal is from enforcement as well, and it addresses the change that it addresses a change, statutory change in the rule, at least the statutory reference that we have in rule related to being impaired on game lands. So originally the rule addressed General Statute 24.01 48B, and we're switching this to 20-4.01 14A. And the reason is that original rule talked about people being under the influence of impaired substances. Well, the new rule would expand their ability to enforce being impaired, and the new rule actually is the new rule defines impairing substances, alcohol, controlled substances under Chapter 90 of the General Statutes, any other drug or psychoactive substance capable of impairing a person's physical or mental faculties in any combination of these substances. And what this change will do, you can look at it as a zero tolerance policy, because it does not distinguish between those who have consumed any amount of alcohol or impairing substance and those who are appreciatively impaired. So if officers saw a person drink an alcoholic beverage and go out hunting, then they could address them with this new changes rule, where otherwise they would have to show that they were under the influence through breathalyzer or other testing methods. Any questions about this rule proposal change? Now I'll turn it back over to Carrie.
All right, so for these next 5 proposals, staff have identified target stakeholders to again include mainly hunters and general game land users, but also the U.S. Army Corps of Engineer for Butner Falls of Neuse and local governments. So in addition to our standard annual cycle outreach, specific outreach for these rules will go in the hunting e-newsletter, and emails will be sent to local governments identified, the Corps of Engineers and the Association of County Commissioners and League of Municipalities. So for the final 5 LAWA rules that Darren just went through, are there any comments, concerns, or questions about clarity of those proposals and what will be achieved with the proposed changes? Any questions about potential impacts of the restrictions to the public? Any thoughts about changes achieving their objectives in a cost-effective and timely manner? Or any other stakeholder groups that should be identified? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead. Up next, we have Brad Howard, Chief of the Wildlife Management Division, to present wildlife management proposals.
Morning, Commissioners. I'm going to present the proposals from the Wildlife Management Division. The first proposal deals with raccoon hunting, and this proposal will remove the daily bag limit for raccoon by means of hunting. Why are we proposing this? Well, we have several requests from both enforcement and some constituent requests relative to the raccoon bag limit for hunting. Most raccoon hunters tend to somewhat self-limit themselves anyway with, if they're hunting with coon dogs and those kind of things. And there's no real biological reason for a daily bag limit for hunting on raccoons. There is no bag limit for trapping. So there's no real biological reason for it to have a daily bag limit for hunting on raccoons. Questions about the raccoon proposal? The next proposal deals with the rules related to red and gray foxes. This is primarily a result of a rule review that our staff conducted. This basically will clarify that there are daily and season bag limits to the firearm fox seasons that is established in the statute that you see there. It will match the fox seasons established in state law with what's in rule and remove the language from rule that creates an archery season on foxes east of I-77, because in the process of that rule, it was determined that we didn't really have the authority, the commission didn't have the authority to establish an archery season for foxes. So that will pull that out of the rule. And so fundamentally, this is a technical change that aligns the rule with the applicable statutes. Questions about the fox rules? Well, there's lots of questions about the fox rules, but questions about this fox rule? Okay, taking of raptors for the purpose of falconry. This is a request from the falconry folks to change the dates that nestling raptors can be taken from the wild. Currently, it's May 1st to June the 30th, and they asked us to change the dates to January 1st through July 31st to accommodate the ability to take a few other species in a greater window. That's well within the federal framework, so we can certainly allow that by rule. It also removes the restrictions on taking American kestrels and great horned owls prior to 1 year, and they can take those as as nestlings as well now with this modification. Not expected to have any biological impact. Take would be very minimal. Questions about this one? Okay, I think this is a change that's technically a 10D change over in the game land section, but it's part of our bear management strategy. So we're including it here for now. This is a change to the designated bear management area rule, and fundamentally this is a sort of a change that came from an oversight and some administrative problems when we were changing the bear hunting season a couple years ago. But this fundamentally removes the restriction on allowing dogs to run unleashed on designated bear management areas. It actually shifts the dates to coincide with the new current opening season of bear season. Previously, the dates matched the previous open season, which was about a week and a half or so later than what it currently is. So for the first week and a half of bear seasons, technically they weren't allowed to run dogs for bear hunting, which was never the intent. So this will fix that minor correction to allow for this is primarily going to be an issue on our point of sale permit hunts, which is Daniel Boone Bear Management Area and Mount Mitchell Bear Management Area, where folks buy their permits point of sale. So once bear season opens, they have a permit to go hunting. So this will clear that problem up. Questions about this one? squirrel seasons. We had a couple of requests. We've had requests periodically. We had a couple of requests this year to open the squirrel season for gray and red squirrels earlier in October, especially now that we've shifted the deer seasons in the western part of the state. That's where some of these requests were coming from. And so there's no biological reason not to do that. So we're proposing to adjust the opening of the gray and red squirrel seasons to make it the Saturday on or nearest October 1st. I think currently it's the Monday on or nearest October the 15th, which is ironic because it's one of our small game species and it's one of the few species that don't have a Saturday opening. So this will make first off, a Saturday opening it a couple of weeks earlier so that the folks can get out there squirrel hunting a little bit earlier. And it kind of aligns our opening dates for gray squirrels and red squirrels with our neighboring states. Questions about the squirrel seasons? Now I'll flip it back to Carrie or Will.
Thanks, Brad. I'm going to now briefly discuss the public engagement strategy for these first 5 wildlife proposals. Staff has identified our target stakeholders as hunters and falconers. And in addition to our standard outreach for all annual cycle rules, specific notice will go to these groups through the hunting e-newsletter and an email directly to licensed falconers and licensed bear hunters. Are there any questions on this engagement strategy, or does anyone feel there's a stakeholder that we left off this list? Okay, moving on. We're now going to review these first 5 wildlife proposals for clarity, impact, implementation, and engagement. So as we mentioned earlier, we want to make sure that these rules are clear and understandable for the public. They're not burdensome, they achieve their purpose, and that we notice them to the correct stakeholders. So does anyone feel that these rules will do what we need them to do? Are there any concerns about the clarity or the impact they'll have on our regulated communities? Are there any thoughts on ways we could achieve what needs to be done in a more cost-effective or timely manner? And is there anyone we're missing from our interested stakeholder list? Okay, hearing none at this time, I'm going to hand it back over to Brad to finish up the wildlife proposals.
Thanks, Will. The next wildlife proposal deals with wildlife collectors and collecting, and this is more of a improvement for clarity and reduce some ambiguity in this particular rule. The rule has also always been interpreted as a person may not possess more than 4 individuals of native reptile species, and then up to 24 or something. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head now. Sorry, of amphibians. It was a little bit unclear as whether that meant 4 individuals of each native reptile species, i.e. they could possess 4 corn snakes, 4 black rat snakes, 4 box turtles, or 4 in aggregate. It has always been interpreted and enforced as an aggregate, so that's how this rule will be changed to make it very clear that it's 4 total native reptiles. Questions about this one? The next one, it deals with the whitetail deer in our urban season for deer. This is just some cleanup as in the urban deer season this season's been established for quite some time now. We've learned a lot of things through the process, and we've learned some stuff with our urban deer study that we're looking at. But one of the things that we wanted to go ahead and do with the urban season was kind of clean up the enrollment process. Currently, it's cumbersome for both the cities that want to enroll and stay enrolled, and also somewhat cumbersome for administrative burden for agency staff. So this proposal will basically just say that once a city decides to opt into the urban season, they are in, and they don't have to take any further action until they decide they don't want to be in the season. And then they can notify us of that, and we will remove them from the season. So it's basically just a way to sort of streamline the process and make it easier on both the cities and our administrative staff getting the cities enrolled. Currently, they have to enroll every year by April 1st. This will remove that burden from them. No other changes to the urban season other than that at this point. Well, they won't have to submit a map. The city itself will just be enrolled. But questions about the urban season? So this proposal deals with our deer proposals and our CWD management area proposals. You guys just saw last week a temporary rule proposal that is designed to do exactly what this proposal is doing, only in the short term for this upcoming season. This change will put it into permanent rule. It'll add Sampson County to the CWD management area rule, and it will remove Sampson County from the white-tailed deer rule. So basically, Sampson's deer season will be over in the CWD management area rule. Questions about? So this is actually two different rules, the coyote hunting rule and the feral swine hunting rule. But this is a request that came from our law enforcement staff that were continuing to struggle with situations where individuals were riding around shining their lights in fields, agriculture fields, etc., places where deer may be gathering, potentially for the purpose of shooting deer at night, poaching deer, but then they would claim to be hunting coyotes or feral swine. This will close that loophole for them and just make it prohibit the shining of an artificial light in search of coyotes or feral swine from a motorized conveyance while in possession of a weapon. So just it removes that loophole for night deer hunters to claim that they were hunting coyotes and swine. And now pursuant to this rule, they won't be able to shine a light from a motorized conveyance with a weapon in the vehicle. Any questions on this one?
Brad, yep,
Yes.
I do have one on that. In times past, I know we've talked about, basically spotlighting for deer, and this is really before coyotes got to be so prevalent on the landscape. Was there any consideration of just suspending? This rule would make it illegal 365 days a year. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Was there any consideration of just suspending it during the hunting season only, that you could not do that? Or, of course, it in one sense, whether you're hunting season or not, I mean, if you're killing deer outside the season, there's no season for them at night anyway. But there has been some discussion in times past about that. Was that a consideration that y'all talked about this time or not, or you're just more comfortable having it year-round suspension of lights at night?
Well, it's so there was lots of discussion with our enforcement folks, the colonel and the majors and folks trying to figure out what issues. So first off, remember that coyote and feral swine season are year round. So
Right.
so they can technically be quote unquote claiming to be hunting coyotes anytime they're out there driving around shining a light, which is what folks were doing. Whether they were hunting coyotes or not, they were out there shining lights with guns in the car, probably shining for deer, but it became extremely hard for our enforcement officers to enforce a poaching case with that. This doesn't prohibit them from hunting coyotes and feral swine at night with a light. That's still perfectly legal. They just can't be shining a light from their truck while they're driving around saying, "Oh, I'm looking for coyotes to hunt." If they want to hunt coyotes at night with a light, go out there and do it like you're supposed to, from a predator hunting standpoint. Same with feral swine. We can make exceptions for legitimate feral swine depopulation operations and those kind of things. That can be done can be and is often done through permits. So that's easy to handle. I don't know if the colonel's on here or if they want to add anything particular to that, but we had a lot of different comments about how to fix this sort of loophole that people had figured out that they were using to keep our officers from catching people that they were pretty positive were trying to shoot deer. So I think this doesn't prohibit anybody that's legitimately hunting coyotes and feral swine at night with a light. It just stops an easy loophole for folks driving around shining for deer.
And I guess just for, trying to be a little nitpicky here. So if I'm in a motorized vehicle riding on my farm on a dirt road on my farm, would it still be illegal? As
It would
opposed
be
to a public,
it would
as opposed to a
be
public
yeah.
road like down the highway or,
If you're on private property, well, the way it's currently written, I think it's that you can't shine a light from a motorized conveyance while in the possession of a weapon, for the purpose of hunting coyotes and feral swine. Honestly, I don't think Philip or anybody's on here to know definitively how that would be enforced if you were entirely on private property. But I think the way it's currently written, it says you can't. Regardless.
okay.
But we can circle back on that and maybe have a little bit more, and and we can circle back and sort of check on exactly what the enforcement interpretation of that, and if we need to, if we need to make it from, I mean, we can consider options to clarify that.
Yeah, I just think there's some ambiguity there that could, that either
I mean,
somebody's going to try to monopolize or capitalize on, or somebody could innocently be doing stuff on private property and not realizing, hey, I'm not on a public road shining a light. This is my property. Why can't I do that?
yeah, I mean,
If y'all could
technically
circle
it's,
back to
yeah.
Colonel on that, that'd be good.
Yeah, we'll do that. I mean, it overlaps with the prima facie law relative to intention to spotlight deer, and there's a lot of nuance in all this. So we'll circle back with the colonel and everybody and just make sure that we've got the boxes checked on that.
Yeah, and I do think if we're gonna, update the wording, we probably need to be I know there's still gonna be ambiguity, but I'd be as clear with that as I possibly could, designating public road as opposed to private road on private property.
Yeah, we can do that. We can check on that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions on coyotes and feral swine? All right, I think I'm going to toss this one to Dr. Evans as she's on here. There she is.
Yep, I am on here. All right. Yes, so we currently require permits to possess or take species and their parts. The permits are required, but the rule language is ambiguous since it only says species. Additionally, we've had some instances of researchers transferring by that language by changing the language from species to species and their parts, and requiring that you would need additional permits to transfer. That would give us an opportunity to make sure that the designee who will be receiving those listed parts is also permitted and in compliance. Any questions? Okay. Carrie, I think.
Nope, back to me. Thanks, Heather. Thanks, Brad. For these last 5 wildlife proposals, staff have identified our target stakeholders as hunters, wildlife collectors, endangered species permit holders, and local governments. In addition to our standard outreach, we are going to provide specific notice to these groups through the hunting e-newsletter, direct notice to local governments, as well as the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, the League of Municipalities, as well as a specific email to endangered species permit holders. there any questions on this public engagement strategy? We're now going to review the last 5 wildlife proposals for clarity, impact, implementation, and engagement. So does anyone feel that these rules will do what they need to be done? And are there any concerns about the clarity or the impact for the public? Do and implement these rules in a more cost-effective or timely manner? Okay, hearing no concerns or questions on these, I'm going to turn it over to Travis to present the wildlife education proposals.
The shooting range rule is to remove the shooting range rules from the game lands portion of the NCAC and can codify the specific rules for agency-owned and managed shooting ranges. The proposed rule will include general restrictions for all visitors, specific regulations for firearms handling, archery equipment standards, trap and skeet range rules, ammunition standards, target requirements, and provisions for staff to maintain a safe environment. The current shooting range rule exists in the game land section of the NCAC. These rules are outdated and do not address many of the issues staff are facing at the facilities, including unruly patrons and unsafe firearms handling. Codifying the new rules for shooting ranges will improve range safety for both staff and the public and improve the ability of law enforcement to charge patrons who fail to comply with agency safety standards. We don't foresee any biological impact, and the proposed rule codifies the standard operating procedures and policies already used by shooting range staff. The proposed rule is anticipated to make enforcement of these policies easier by defining in rule how and when the staff may remove an uncompliant patrons from the shooting range facilities. No negative impacts are expected on compliance of the shooting range of shooters at the ranges. And any questions?
All right, so for this rule, staff have identified shooting range users as the main stakeholders. So we plan to notice these changes at the shooting ranges themselves, but also include this information in the hunting e-newsletter in addition to all of the normal annual cycle outreach. So now we'll look at it for clarity, impact, implementation, and engagement. So based on the explanation and the drafted rule text that you all have, which is a new rule, are there any thoughts or questions about what this new shooting range rule will accomplish? Any questions or concerns about unnecessary burdens or redundancy? And then finally, any input on additional stakeholders or outreach? All right. So the next time that everyone will see these proposals will be at the June commission meeting when the full board will vote to notice text. In the meantime, staff will work on preparing the fiscal notes and finalizing the rule text for all the rules presented today. And as a reminder, this rulemaking schedule will get the rules to the Rules Review Commission before the end of the year, so that in case we do receive 10 letters of objection on any of the proposed changes, we should make it to the 2027 long session of the General Assembly. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes our rules presentation for today.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. I'd just like to just first off, I'd just like to thank Corey, Darren, Brad, Dr. Evans, and Travis for their presentations. They're very thorough and just the kind of thing we're looking for. I'd particularly like to thank Carrie also as the coordinator of all this. In my time on the commission, this new format, I mean, the thoroughness and clarity, which we have had some criticism in the past, but with this new format, with this thoroughness and clarity, I just don't see how they could be any concern by the public that we've not considered everything and given them an opportunity to participate. So I'd like to thank everybody for that. Is there, does anyone, any commissioners, anyone else have a comment that they'd like to make before we conclude the meeting? Hearing none, I'd like to thank everybody for participating, and those in the public that have listened to this whole process. You know, we do this and as again to try to make everybody understand what we're doing and what our thinking is as we move forward. So thank everybody for participating, and with that, we will conclude the meeting. Thank you very much. Have a good day.